On May 21, 1960, Jeffrey Dahmer, later known as the Milwaukee Monster, was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Between 1978 and 1991, he murdered 17 men and boys. Many of his crimes even involved necrophilia, preservation of body parts, and cannibalism. On November 28, 1994, he was killed in prison. This is the story of how a withdrawn kid from Ohio became one of America's most infamous serial killers, and how the failures around him left families and an entire city asking how the warning signs were missed.
Milwaukee police found body parts in a North Side apartment, and now they wonder if they've uncovered some kind of factory. This was the scene earlier this morning.
Murder, cannibalism, and sex with the dead, brought about by a quiet Milwaukee man who turned a small apartment into a place of sexual fantasy, violence, and by the time police reached apartment 213 in July of 1991, Dahmer had already spent 13 years hiding what he had done. He had buried and later scattered the remains of his first victim in Ohio.
The hitchhiker's name was Stephen Hicks. He was just 18. Jeffrey Dahmer took him to his parents' house. There he strangled him with a barbell. He dismembered the body and hid it in a drain pipe.
Carried bodies through his grandmother's basement, kept preserved remains from Anthony Sears in a workplace locker, and finally, built his private world in the Oxford Apartments at 924 North 25th Street. The discovery of his horrific deeds began with a man who refused to die there. Tracy Edwards escaped into the street with a handcuff still locked around his wrist and flagged down 2 Milwaukee police officers. He told them a man with a knife had threatened him.
It's like I told the policeman that this freak, this crazy guy, was trying to hurt me.
What was he trying to do?
Like he was listening to my heart, because at a point he told me he was going to eat my heart at that point. So I reached up, I got up, and then I hit him, and I ran out.
The officers followed him back to the apartment, expecting just another late-night disturbance in a city building. Inside, they found the photographs first. Then came the skulls, the chemicals, the refrigerator, and the barrel. What had looked like a drunken argument became a murder case so grotesque that even veteran officers struggled to describe it. Jeffrey Dahmer seemed, to many who knew him, too ordinary for what police found.
I thought he was into collecting old garbage or something, I don't know.
I didn't know much about him. I seen him a few times, and every time I seen him, he looked like he was like a whacked out type of dude.
The monster in apartment 213 had once been a child in family photographs, a shy boy in Ohio, a student who played strange jokes, a soldier, a factory worker, and a grandson living in his grandmother's house. The first child of Joyce and Lionel Dahmer was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on May 21, 1960. His name was Jeffrey. At first, the Dahmer family appeared to be beginning a normal life. Lionel was working toward a career in chemistry. Joyce was a young mother. Jeffrey was remembered as bright, active, and affectionate. A little boy who liked attention, liked to play, and liked to know what was going on around him. Jeffrey was also unusually curious. He wanted to touch things, open things, and understand their texture. Once, when Lionel collected the bones of small animals that had died under the house, Jeffrey seemed fascinated by the sound they made. In the moment, it looked like nothing more than a child's curiosity. In retrospect, everything about the memory is haunting.
It was a terrible smell, so I went underneath and cleaned it out, the smell of the skunk, and cleaned out whatever else was under, cans and bones, and collected them all. And Jeff did seem to exhibit an interest in the way they clanked as he picked them up and put them back into the metal pail.
Lionel finished his schooling, and the family moved to Ohio, relocating several times before settling on a wooded lot in Bath Township, near Akron and south of Cleveland. It was there that Lionel began to notice that the previously outgoing Jeffrey had become shy and withdrawn. The Dahmers tried to involve him in activities that might bring him closer to other children. Jeffrey helped choose the name of his younger brother, David. On weekends, father and son planted gardens and raised sheep for 4-H fairs. Young Jeffrey even gave Lionel a handmade card with a poem. When Jeffrey was 10, Joyce was hospitalized and treated for anxiety. From there, the marriage began to fail. The arguments at home became more intense, and Jeffrey retreated further into himself. His fascination with nature and small animals continued into his teenage years. Riding the country roads around Bath with garbage bags, Jeffrey searched for roadkill. He brought the carcasses back to the woods behind the house and dissected them in secret, curious about what they looked like inside.
The usual dissection of fetal pigs. I took the remains of that home and kept the skeleton of it. And I just started branching out, dogs, cats. All I know is that I wanted to see what the insides of these animals looked like.
At the same time, his sexuality was developing. Jeffrey discovered that he was attracted to men, but the thoughts of sex became interlocked with fantasies of unconscious bodies and The fantasies excited him. He later said that around age 14 or 15, he began having obsessive thoughts of violence mixed with sex. And because he didn't know how to tell anyone, he kept it all inside. The fantasies included lying next to an unconscious man.
I think it was around age 14 or 15. Started having obsessive thoughts of violence intermingled with sex. And it just got worse and worse.
For the first time, Jeffrey planned to move the fantasy out of his mind and into the world. He waited with a bat for a local jogger, intending to knock him unconscious and lie beside him. The jogger never came by that day, and Jeffrey didn't make a second attempt. As he entered high school, the fantasies frightened him. Alcohol became the escape. He drank before class, sometimes filling a cup with liquor in the morning and carrying it into school. To classmates, he was strange, sometimes funny, other times pathetic. He became known for bizarre stunts that students called doing a Dahmer.
That's so funny, man. That's what they call doing a Dahmer.
With adults, Jeffrey could be the opposite. Teachers could see a model student when he wanted to be one. But really, no one really knew what was going on in his mind. By the end of high school, he had slipped away from ordinary social life. For Jeffrey Dahmer, the summer of 1978 started with high school graduation. It would be downhill from there. After years of fighting, his parents divorced. Lionel moved out of the family house in Bath, and Joyce left for Wisconsin with David. Jeffrey found himself alone.
The house was empty. My mother was up in Chippewa Falls with her family, and my dad was living in a rented motel about 5 miles away due to the divorce. And I pretty much had the place to myself.
Jeffrey was 18, and like many teenagers his age, he had sexual fantasies. His had moved far outside the normal range. They included a partner and keeping him from leaving. The empty house gave him the chance to act. Just weeks after graduation, Dahmer picked up a hitchhiker along the road. His name was Stephen Hicks. He was 18 years old and on his way to a concert. Dahmer invited him back to the house. They drank beer and spent a few hours together. Then Hicks said he had to go. Jeffrey didn't want to be alone. He struck Hicks with a barbell, then strangled him.
Subject states that when he was 18 years of age and living in Richfield, Ohio, he picked up a hitchhiker whom he described as a white male about 19 years of age. He states he took him home and had sex with him, and states they were drinking beer and became intoxicated. He states they got into a physical fight because the 19-year-old individual tried to leave, and that during the fight, he states he struck the hitchhiker with a barbell.
The fantasy had finally become real. Dahmer had fulfilled the urge, but he was sober enough to know he had committed, and he quickly began to hide the evidence. He dismembered Hicks with a knife, using a skill he had practiced as a teenager with road. He put the pieces into trash bags and loaded them into his car. In the middle of the night, on the way to dispose of them, police pulled him over for drifting across the center line. For the first time, Jeffrey was trapped. The body parts were in the car, and the officers asked what was in the bags. Dahmer told them he was troubled by his parents' divorce and had taken trash to the dump because he couldn't sleep. The police let him go with a ticket.
He was so nervous that he was driving erratically, he was stopped by a police officer. Mr. Dahmer kept his wits about him. He told the police officer that his parents had recently divorced. He said he couldn't sleep and wanted to take a garbage bag to the garbage dump.
Jeffrey returned home and continued hiding what was left of Stephen Hicks. He eventually smashed the bones and scattered the fragments in the woods behind the house. The first disappeared, just like that. In August, Lionel came back to the house and found his son alone. He urged Jeffrey to find work, took him to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and brought him to counseling. Nothing seemed to reach him. The drinking continued, and only alcohol appeared to dull the violence and terror left by the murder. By the end of the summer, Jeffrey was still jobless. Lionel suggested college, and Jeffrey enrolled at Ohio State. He spent the first quarter in a drunken stupor, selling plasma and spending the money on beer. Predictably, he flunked out and returned home. Lionel then suggested the armed services. Like many choices made around him, Jeffrey passively went along. After basic training, he was sent to an army hospital in San Antonio, Texas, where he received specialized instruction as a field medic. There, Dahmer learned more about human anatomy, and for one of the first times in his life, he seemed excited by what he was doing. For a while, the army changed his surface. His body became leaner and stronger. The shy and reclusive young man became more outgoing, even smiling. But the change didn't last. Sent to Germany, he returned to heavy drinking. His superiors noticed, and Dahmer received an early discharge. Years later, Preston Davis and Billy Joe Capshaw said Dahmer assaulted them during his military service. Dahmer was never charged or convicted in connection with those allegations, so they belong in the script only as claims made by the men after the murders became public.
I want to welcome two men who say they were victims of Jeffrey Dahmer.
He had me tied up naked to a bunk, and was...
After the army, Dahmer went directly to Miami Beach without contacting his family. He worked in a sandwich shop and lived in a motel. When his drinking costs overtook his room costs, he slept on the beach. Eventually, he called home for help. Lionel refused to send money but bought him a ticket back. Lionel tried for a year to help his alcoholic son and failed. Jeffrey was sent to live with his father's mother, Catherine Dahmer, near Milwaukee. There he seemed, at last, to find stability. At his grandmother's house, Jeffrey made a concentrated effort to turn his life around. He stopped drinking for a time, went to church, and fought what he believed were immoral physical urges. He found jobs, first at a blood bank and then working nights as a chocolate mixer at the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory. The church-going life didn't last. After 3 quiet years, Jeffrey came face to face with his fears at a library, where a man handed him a note offering inappropriate favors. Dahmer declined, but he later said the note awakened immoral urges deep inside him. Specifically, he wanted the submissive company of another male, someone to fulfill his physical needs without burdening him with needs of his own.
No, at the time, it was almost addictive. I wouldn't have to worry about any of their needs or anything. I just had complete control of the situation.
Jeffrey started with a perfectly submissive partner. He stole a store window mannequin and kept it in his closet until his grandmother found it and insisted he get rid of it. On his free nights, he began exploring Milwaukee's gay life, browsing adult bookstores and going to bathhouses. The bath clubs catered mostly to men seeking anonymous. To make his partners submissive, Jeffrey gave them drinks laced with sleeping pills. When they fell unconscious, he lay beside them and listened to their bodies, their breathing, their heartbeats, and the sounds of their stomachs. The experiments ended after one man overdosed and spent a week in the hospital. Dahmer was told not to return.
When I moved to Milwaukee in '81, I started reading pornography, going to the bookstores. Eventually that led to frequenting the gay bars.
By his late 20s, Jeffrey Dahmer was living at his grandmother's house, working nights, and prowling the city's gay scene. No one suspected that the reclusive loner with boyish looks was becoming a serial killer. In November 1987, Dahmer met 25-year-old Stephen Tuomi at a downtown club. After a few drinks, they left for the Ambassador Hotel. Dahmer used an old trick, putting sleeping pills in Tuomi's drink to render him unconscious. He later claimed he woke the next morning to find Tuomi dead, with no memory of beating him to death.
One time I brought this young man back to the hotel room, the Ambassador Hotel. Was just planning on drugging him and spending the night with him. I had no intention. When I woke up in the morning, he had a broken rib here. Was heavily bruised. Apparently I had beaten him to death.
With the first murder behind him, Dahmer didn't panic in the same way. He went out and bought the largest suitcase he could find. At the hotel, he forced Tuomi's body into the case, dragged it into a taxi, returned to his grandmother's house, and disposed of him in the basement.
Dahmer says he snuck the corpse of his victim, Stephen Tuomi, out of his hotel room in a suitcase. Then he took it to his grandmother's house, where he cut up the body and put it in plastic garbage bags.
That was when the obsession went into full swing. After the second death, Dahmer gave up trying to control his desires for long. His life became the pursuit of a fantasy in which his partners would never leave him. Dahmer now started pursuing full control. A partner submissive for one night was no longer enough. He wanted to keep them that way forever.
But that's what started the whole spree all over again.
But Jeffrey Dahmer was out of control. The urge to kill had overpowered him. As police later learned, he wasn't satisfied with his victims. He wanted more.
Outside Club 219, he met 14-year-old James Doxtator and offered him money to spend the night. They went back to his grandmother's house while she slept. Dahmer dosed and strangled him, the method he used in most of his. He later described strangling, in his distorted logic, as a way to avoid what he considered unnecessary suffering while still giving him control and the thrill of murder. With Doxtator, Dahmer explored the fantasies further. He hid the body in the basement for a week and continued to touch it. When the body began to decay, he dismembered it near the floor drain, as he had done with Tuomi. 2 months later, Dahmer picked up 22-year-old Richard Guerrero from a Milwaukee bar, again offering money to spend the night. In this inhumanely familiar pattern, he dosed and strangled him, spent time with the corpse, disposed of it, and placed the body parts into trash bags for city garbage collection. On April 2, 1988, Ronald Flowers Jr. survived an encounter with Dahmer. Flowers had car trouble, and Dahmer offered help. He brought Flowers back to the grandmother's house and gave him coffee. After that, Flowers lost consciousness.
I was preoccupied with getting my car fixed and getting back home, that he had the cab drop us off a little ways away from the house because he didn't want to wait because he lived with his grandmother.
What's your next memory?
Woke up in County General Hospital in Milwaukee.
Flowers woke up in County General Hospital, injured and missing some of his personal belongings. He reported Dahmer, but the murders still went under the radar. Once again, a warning of what is to come appeared, yet it failed to reveal the truth. In the summer of 1988, Jeff's grandmother asked him to move out. She had become troubled by his late hours, the mannequin in his room, and foul smells from the basement. He took an apartment on Milwaukee's west side and immediately accelerated his spiral into madness. In September 1988, Dahmer approached a 13-year-old Laotian boy named Somsak Synthesum Phone on the street, promising him money to come back to his apartment for a nude photo shoot. Inside, he gave the teenage boy an alcoholic drink laced with the sleeping medication Halcyon. The drugging did not keep Somsak under Dahmer's control. Dahmer forced himself on him, but Somsak managed to break free and flee the apartment, running to his family to tell them what had happened, leading to a police investigation.
A young man informed me that he had been walking on the street and a man had offered him some money to pose for some photos. He agreed and accompanied the man to his apartment. The man wanted him to lower his underwear lower during the photos, and that upon leaving he felt fuzzy like a drunk man, he stated. And he subsequently went to Sinai Samaritan Hospital where he was treated for an overdose.
Dahmer was convicted of second-degree assault and enticing a minor for immoral purposes. On May 23, 1989, the court sentenced him to 1 year in the Milwaukee House of Correction with work release, 5 years of probation, and the offender's registration. Before he began serving that sentence, Dahmer struck again. On March 25, 1989, he met 24-year-old Anthony Sears at a gay club and killed him. This time, he preserved Sears's head and private parts, keeping them for a time in his locker at the chocolate factory before later moving them with him.
He became so warped by his evil impulses that he even took a victim's head with him to work at the Ambrosia chocolate factory.
I kept the mummified head and skull of one of the victims in a carrying case in my locker at work.
Before sentencing, Lionel wrote to the judge and urged that Jeffrey be placed in an alcohol treatment program, warning that he had tremendous reservations about his son's chances when he returned to the streets.
This is a letter that I wrote to Judge William Gardner. I am writing in regard to my son, Jeff Dahmer, who is scheduled to be released March 1990. I do feel, though, that this may be our last chance to initiate something lasting. Sincerely, yours, Lionel Dahmer.
No residential treatment program was ordered. Dahmer served roughly 10 months of the one-year term and was released early, while the deeper danger remained unseen. He moved into another low-income neighborhood in Milwaukee. The rent at the Oxford Apartments was cheap, and the location was close to the gay clubs. On his own again, he was free to feed the urges that had come to dominate his life. Within months of his release, and within a week of moving into apartment 213, Dahmer began a 14-month frenzy. He would leave more families searching for loved ones who had simply disappeared. Police searched too, but the cases didn't come together. All of Dahmer's time, money, thoughts, and desires were being drawn into the secret world inside apartment 213. Raymond Smith was killed in May 1990. Edward Smith was killed in June. Ernest Miller and David Thomas were killed in September. Curtis Straughter disappeared in February 1991. Inside the apartment, bodies began to pile up. Dahmer bought a 57-gallon drum and filled it with powerful chemicals to dissolve severed limbs and torsos. After weeks in the chemicals, the remains became sludge, which he flushed down the toilet or bathtub drain. For other victims, he boiled flesh from bone on the stove. A sweet, bitter odor of death began to infest the building. Tenants traced the smell to Dahmer's door. He blamed spoiled food, tropical fish, or chemicals. The excuses were strange, and the people weren't completely oblivious. But the lies bought Jeffrey time to continue his massacre. Another thing about Dahmer was that he was pathologically lonely. He didn't want his partners to leave, even after death. He took keepsake photographs while removing their and preserved certain parts. One thing led to another, and the behaviors became more deviant as the old fantasies stopped satisfying him. He began planning a shrine made of skeletons and skulls. He searched for the perfect partner, one who would be completely submissive, but alive and not prone to decay. On multiple living victims, Dahmer performed crude experiments on their heads, then injected chemicals directly into their brains. None of his experimental zombies survived more than a short time. In perhaps the final effort to keep victims with him, Dahmer began consuming them. He later said it made him feel as if they had become a permanent part of him.
I was branching out. That's when the started eating of the heart and the arm muscle. It was a way of making me feel that they were a part of me.
For Dahmer, this act of eating his victims satiated a level of curiosity, sexual satisfaction, and possession that none of his previous horrific deeds had been able to do. Throughout this year of killing, Dahmer still appeared to be normal. In family video taken at his grandmother's house, he talked calmly with his father, as if he was just another human being. It was almost impossible, watching that version of him, to imagine what he was hiding was the Milwaukee monster.
Looking at Jeff, he looks entirely normal, clean cut, very nicely dressed, responds very sociably. You still keep up your membership there, though. There's nothing to indicate, really, that he had recently people.
One victim almost got away, and his identity was almost as if it were revenge. It was Conorak Synthesum Phone, who was the younger brother of the Laotian boy Dahmer had been jailed for molesting and was still on probation for assaulting. In May 26, 1991, Dahmer drugged 14-year-old Konarak. While Konarak slept, Dahmer went out to buy more liquor. While he was gone, the teenager woke up and started wandering the streets of Milwaukee, naked, bleeding, and heavily disoriented. Dahmer had drilled a hole into his skull and injected hydrochloric acid in an attempt to render him docile. Bystanders, including Nicole Childress and Sandra Smith, saw him and called for help. Glenda Cleveland, Smith's mother and Childress's aunt, called police afterward and kept pushing for the boy to be protected.
Was anything done about the situation? You need the names or information or anything from us?
No, not at all.
You don't?
No, it was an intoxicated boyfriend of another boyfriend.
Well, how old was this child?
It wasn't a child, it was an adult.
Are you positive?
Yeah, no, he's, it's all taken care of, ma'am.
Yeah, but are you sure?
By the time officers arrived, Dahmer had returned from his beer run. As he had with police in Ohio after his first killing, Dahmer lied smoothly. He told officers that Konarak was his adult lover, around 19 or 20 years old, and drunk after a quarrel. Dahmer brought the officers into his apartment and gave them a story. The police believed the boy was of legal age and treated the incident as a lover's quarrel. They didn't learn Konarak's name, nor did they discover Dahmer's conviction for assaulting Konarak's brother. They did not search far enough to discover the body of Tony Hughes, which was still inside the apartment. Despite bystanders pleading with the police that the boy was in danger, the officers believed Dahmer and escorted Konarak back into the killer's apartment.
He was even able to con the police into returning a 14-year-old boy to him after neighbors called 911 upset that the child was in the street naked and bleeding. Dahmer convinced the police that he and the boy were simply having a lover's quarrel.
Call it negligence or the skills of a pathological liar. Either way, again, Dahmer had been slippery enough to keep the killings a secret. As soon as the officers left, the two responding officers, John Balcerzak and Joseph Gabrish, were fired. However, an arbitrator later reinstated them with back pay in 1994, a decision that caused severe community backlash. In 1995, the city of Milwaukee agreed to settle a lawsuit with the Synthosamphone family for $850,000. After Konarak, Dahmer killed Matt Turner, Jeremiah Weinberger, Oliver Lacey, and Joseph Breithoft. By July 1991, he was careful, but not careful enough. The apartment held too much evidence at this point, and with eyes on him, the lies were running out. On July 22, 1991, Dahmer went out hunting again. Near the Grand Avenue Mall, he approached 3 men and offered money to come back to his apartment for drinks, videos, and photographs. Tracy Edwards agreed to go. Inside apartment 213, Edwards noticed the foul odor. He saw boxes and chemicals. Dahmer shifted between ordinary conversation and threatening behavior. Then came the handcuff and the knife. Edwards understood that panic would get him killed. He talked to Dahmer, watched him, and waited for the chance to escape. At one point, Dahmer led him toward the bedroom, where Edwards saw the 57-gallon barrel. He still didn't know what was inside it, but he knew the apartment was dangerous.
Okay, first of all, it seemed like a normal apartment. When we got inside, he turned off burglar alarms. I asked him why. First, it was a foul odor, okay? Turn to the right, like the fish tank is here. I'm turning all the way over here.
You turn to your right to look at it?
To look at the fish tank, right.
And when that happens, what happens to you?
All of a sudden, a handcuff and a knife is pulled on me. Yeah.
Then Dahmer told him he was going to eat his heart. When Dahmer finally dropped his guard, Edwards struck him and ran. He flagged down police, and this time, the officers followed him back to the door.
It's like I told the policeman that this freak, this crazy guy, was trying to hurt me.
What was he trying to do?
Like he was listening to my heart, because at a point he told me he was going to eat my heart at that point. So I reached up, I got up, and then I hit him, and I ran out.
When the officers entered the apartment, they found scores of Polaroids, showing bodies in various stages of the disposal process. More discoveries followed in the kitchen and throughout the apartment. Skulls, a head in the refrigerator, a freezer with dismembered limbs and flesh, metal cooking pots with mummified remains, the 57-gallon drum with torsos inside. This time, there was no lie Dahmer could tell to save himself. At the police station, detectives began a marathon interview with the suspected killer. At first, Dahmer blamed the booze, saying he would not have been caught if he had not been so drunk. But once he sobered up, no one could guess the details that would follow. Dahmer told detectives that when he finished speaking, they would be famous. He spent the next weeks recounting the murder of 17 men and boys in a confession that ran to 159 pages. With his information, investigators returned to the childhood home in Bath, Ohio, and recovered the shattered remains of Stephen Hicks. The coroner began matching skulls with victims. Police began the sad task of notifying families. Dahmer pleaded guilty, but insane, and the issue of sanity became the question before the jury. There was little argument about whether Jeffrey Dahmer had. The bodies, the photographs, and the confession answered that. What remained was the legal question of insanity. Wisconsin had no death penalty. If the jury found Dahmer sane, he would spend the rest of his life in prison. If they found him insane, he would be confined to a mental institution. His defense team had to prove that he suffered from a mental disease or defect, and that it deprived him of substantial capacity either to appreciate the wrongfulness of his conduct or to conform his conduct to the law. The crime seemed to many people like proof of madness. Dahmer had violated the dead, cut up bodies, preserved skulls, ate flesh, and violated minors. But the law had a strict definition of insanity. Violating the deceased was a recognized sexual disorder, but a sexual disorder didn't automatically make a killer legally insane. The man who entered the Milwaukee courtroom in January 1992 appeared completely normal until the words of his confession were read aloud. Lionel Dahmer sat beside his second wife, Sherry, stunned by details no one had prepared him to hear. The jury found Jeffrey Dahmer legally sane. Before sentencing, relatives of the victims were allowed to speak. Some cried, while others couldn't contain their rage.
I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I hate you, mother. I hate you. Something's out of control. Don't Jeffrey, I kill you. God damn it. Look at me, motherfucker.
Once order was restored, Dahmer spoke publicly for the first time, saying he was sorry for what he had done to the families. He insisted he would bring his victims back to life if given the chance.
Your Honor, it is over now. This has never been a case of trying to get free. I didn't ever want freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself. In closing, I just want to say that I hope God has forgiven me. I know society will never be able to forgive me. I know the families of the victims will never be able to forgive me for what I have done. And if I could give my life right now to bring their loved ones back, I would do it. I am so very sorry.
To many relatives, the apology could not carry much weight. They had just heard details of crimes so routine and calculated that remorse was impossible for them to measure from a courtroom statement. Regardless, the apology did not change the sentence. Dahmer received 15 consecutive life terms in Wisconsin. The Oxford Apartments, his last residence, stood for a time as a painful reminder of the lives that had ended there. In November 1992, the building was demolished. Jeffrey Dahmer's final home was the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. In prison, at the age of 32, his life became a conflicted introspection. He tried to sort out the blame for his killing nature and sought divine forgiveness for it. Dahmer had spent time in church as a boy and with his grandmother as an adult, but he had lost religion during the murder spree. In prison, he returned to it. He talked with ministers, asked questions, and decided he wanted to be baptized. In 1994, Minister Roy Ratcliffe visited him. Dahmer could seem affable and childlike, a grown man with the curiosity of a boy. On May 10, 1994, he was baptized in a prison whirlpool. To some, it looked like genuine transformation through faith. To people who knew the extent of his crimes, it remained impossible to think that a pathological liar wouldn't be lying even then. The dark fantasies hadn't simply vanished, though. Whether lying or telling the truth, Dahmer admitted that he might have to live with the compulsive thoughts for the rest of his life. But it's not like he had any chance of fulfilling them in the first place. And so, in prison, the predator became prey. Other inmates knew who he was. On July 3, 1994, he survived an attack in the prison chapel. On November 28, 1994, inmate Christopher Scarver attacked Dahmer and Jesse Anderson, while the three men were assigned to clean a prison gym bathroom. Dahmer was rushed to a hospital and pronounced dead about an hour later. Anderson died 2 days later. Among Dahmer's last wishes was that he be cremated, with no grave and no marker. After the legal disputes over his remains ended, his body was cremated and his ashes were divided between his mother and father. The horrible questions posed by Jeffrey Dahmer's life continued after his death. They defied simple answers. There were red flags, but they were scattered across so many years. A lonely child, an alcoholic teenager, a strange young man, a convicted sex offender, a bad smell in an apartment building, and a boy in the street who should have been saved. The name Dahmer became infamous, but the case belongs also to the people he murdered. Stephen Hicks, Stephen Tuomi, James Dockstader, Richard Guerrero, Anthony Sears, Raymond Smith, Edward Smith, Ernest Miller, David Thomas, Curtis Straughter, Errol Lindsay, Tony Hughes, Conorak Synthesumphone, Matt Turner, Jeremiah Weinberger, Oliver Lacey, and Joseph Braidhoft. It belongs to the survivors, including Ronald Flowers Jr., Somsack Synthesumphone, and Tracy Edwards, whose escape finally brought police back to apartment 213. Public information on these surviving victims is limited, and that's all the much for the better. The men who lived through encounters with Dahmer, the least they deserve is for their present lives to be private, and we will let it stay that way. And yes, there were signs in Jeff's life of what he would become, but he was secretive and careful. Combine that with how the system failed his victims. It's tragic but not surprising that by the time the door to his apartment opened, the evidence inside it had already become a record of 17 lives that couldn't be returned.